What did cowboys eat on the open range? Ever wonder what cowboys really ate out on the open prairie? Picture months in the saddle, dusty trails, and a chuckwagon kitchen working its magic. For these rugged men, food was more than fuel. It was comfort and survival. Today, let's explore the surprising, sometimes bizarre dishes that kept 19th century cowboys going strong. You might be amazed by what ended up on their plates. The chuckwagon, the heart of every mobile cowboy camp. On those long cattle drives, providing fresh food seemed like an impossible challenge. But then, in 1866, a Texas rancher named Charles Goodnight had a brilliant idea. He invented the mobile kitchen, also known as the chuckwagon. Do you remember those sturdy Studebaker wagons often used in the Civil War? Goodnight modified them, transforming a military vehicle into a kitchen on wheels, a true revolution for food supply on the trail, instead of cowboys having to carry their own dry provisions. Imagine this. A mobile kitchen wasn't just an ordinary wagon. It had a sturdy chuck box at the back, with cleverly designed drawers and shelves to hold everything from flour, beans, and coffee to pots and pans. A hinged lid could even fold out to become a convenient cooking surface right in the middle of the wild prairie. This wagon was large enough to carry not only plenty of food, but also a precious barrel of fresh water, along with cooking utensils and, especially, fuel for cooking. Often, a large canvas hammock called a possum belly was slung under the wagon to hold firewood or cow chips, dried cow dung, as fuel. The chuckwagon was more than just a mobile kitchen. It was the center of life on the trail. It was where cowboys found comfort, nourishment, and sustenance for long working days and cold nights. It was like a small mobile home, bringing warmth and hope amidst the vast expanse of the prairie. Cookie, the unsung hero behind the wheel. If the chuckwagon was the heart, then Cookie was truly the soul of every mobile cowboy camp. Cookie was the cook for the chuckwagon, and his authority was second only to the trail boss. You might have heard about the importance of cooks in the military or on ships, but for cowboys, Cookie was even more than that. He didn't just cook, he was a true multitasker, often having to help with horses, navigate the trail, and even act as a dentist, barber, or doctor if needed. These were invaluable skills, indispensable on a long journey where no modern conveniences were available. Most cooks weren't culinary professionals, but rather former cowboys who were too old for horseback riding, usually around 25 years old. Imagine a typical day for Cookie. He had to wake up very early, around 3 a.m., when the sky was still full of stars, to prepare breakfast for the cowboys. After breakfast, before the sun was high, Cookie would pack up the chuckwagon and travel about 15 to 17 miles along the trail to prepare dinner for the cowboys when they arrived in the evening. At lunchtime, cowboys usually fended for themselves, eating jerky and hardtack right on horseback. The foreman understood that a well-fed man could endure an incredible amount of hardship, and a good cook was an invaluable asset on the trail. Life without Cookie would have been much harder, and he was the one who brought energy and morale to the entire crew. The basic menu, the foundation of survival. The cowboys' menu, though simple, was absolutely essential for maintaining health during harsh journeys. These were the dishes that helped them overcome challenges, intimately tied to the resilient image of the West. Beans, the cowboys' indispensable energy source. Beans, especially pinto beans, were not just a food item, but a symbol of the cowboys' endurance and resourcefulness. Think of them as the primary, most abundant, and sustainable source of protein they could rely on, especially during long treks across the wild prairie. Sometimes kidney beans or white beans were also used, but pinto beans were the top choice due to their preservation capabilities and nutritional content, helping maintain stamina for long days under the sun and wind. Preparing beans was an art in itself on the trail. Often cooked in a Dutch oven, the beans would simmer over the campfire overnight, absorbing every bit of flavor from the wood, and the crisp western air. You can imagine the warm, rich aroma of beans wafting through the cold night, bringing comfort after a long, tiring day and serving as a much-anticipated, energy-packed breakfast. Beans weren't just for one meal. They could be used for several consecutive meals, showcasing the cowboys' economy and ingenuity. Even more surprisingly, to waste nothing, some cowboys even repurposed leftover beans by forming them into patties and frying them again, a dish both economical and unique. To enhance the flavor, beans were often seasoned with fresh chili and garlic, creating flavorful frijoles with the distinctive taste of Tex-Mex cuisine, a cultural fusion characteristic of the Southwest. This dish was sometimes also called chili, a familiar spicy flavor of the West. Beans not only filled their stomachs, but also provided stable energy, being the cowboys' closest friend on the trail, helping them overcome the harsh challenges of nomadic life. It was a simple, yet powerful dish, intrinsically linked to the image of the resilient cowboy and the spirit of no waste. Salt pork, bacon, a valuable and versatile fat source. In conditions with limited food preservation, salt pork became an indispensable part of the cowboys' diet. This was a type of pork preserved with salt, easy to produce and transport, becoming the most important source of fat, providing abundant calories for strenuous labor. Unlike the thinner bacon we're familiar with today, cowboy salt pork was usually made from the fattier cuts of the hog's belly, thick and rich in fat. You can imagine that salty, greasy piece of meat sizzling in a cast-iron skillet in the morning, delivering a large amount of essential energy for grueling hours on horseback, helping them maintain stamina and alertness during long days under the sun and wind. Salt pork wasn't just a direct energy source, it was also a natural seasoning and cooking oil for many other dishes. The grease from salt pork was often used to fry biscuits, cornbread, or to thicken soups and stews, adding rich flavor and richness to simple meals. The aroma of sizzling salt pork in the morning skillet was one of the most anticipated smells, signaling a satisfying meal before starting a challenging new day. This dish is testament to the cowboys' practicality and ingenuity in making the most of what they had, transforming simple ingredients into a precious source of life. Though not a fancy dish, salt pork was a vital element, ensuring cowboys had enough strength to face all challenges on the trail. It's part of the memory of a simple but powerful life, where every bite had practical value and brought warmth amidst the vast prairie. Hardtack biscuits. Hardtack, or simply biscuits, in the cowboy context, is a food whose full value perhaps only those who experienced the harsh life of a cowboy could truly understand. Made from the most basic ingredients, just flour, water, and salt, they were baked multiple times until rock hard, with the sole purpose of being preserved for years on the trail without spoiling. However, as you can imagine, they weren't delicious eaten plain. Biting into a piece of this hard biscuit was like trying to eat a dry rock. To make them easier to consume, these biscuits often had to be soaked in water, fried in lard, or dipped in hot coffee, making them softer and adding flavor. This not only softened the biscuits, but also added essential flavor and calories, making them a more digestible meal under scarce conditions. A harsh reality cowboys had to accept was that these biscuits were sometimes called worm castles, because they often housed worms or larvae. This is a clear reminder of the primitive hygiene and food preservation conditions of that era, a reality cowboys faced daily. Nevertheless, hardtack remained an important source of carbohydrates, providing slow-release energy that helped cowboys maintain stamina during long days of riding. It wasn't just food, but also a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and the acceptance of hardship by those living in the Wild West. This biscuit carries the story of survival, of making the most of what was available, no matter how dry or difficult to swallow it might seem. It's an unforgettable part of the cowboy culinary heritage, a lesson in toughness and always moving forward. Cornbread, pan de campo, rustic flavor and the warmth of home. Cornbread, or pan de campo, country bread, was an everyday dish, especially popular with Texas cowboys, carrying the rustic, folksy flavor of the Wild West. Its recipe was incredibly simple, requiring only cornmeal, lard, salt, and a bit of milk or water. Unlike the soft, fluffy cornbread we often see today, the cowboys' cornbread was much denser and firmer, helping to fill their stomachs and provide sustained energy for a long day's work. You can imagine a warm, fragrant piece of cornbread, smelling of corn and lard, carefully prepared by cookie right over the campfire after a long day on the move, bringing a little taste of home. Another popular variation was corn dodgers, small cornmeal patties deep-fried in lard. These were convenient, easy to carry, and eat quickly while working on horseback. Cornbread was not only easy to make, but also a rich source of carbs, playing a vital role in providing energy, helping cowboys have enough strength to work in all weather conditions. This dish also shows cultural fusion, especially with Mexican cuisine, where corn is a staple food and widely used in basic dishes. Cornbread is a testament to the ingenuity of transforming simple ingredients into highly nutritious food, suitable for nomadic living conditions. It evokes an era where simplicity and practicality were key to survival, where the authentic taste of the countryside was a great comfort amidst the vast prairie, a dish carrying the flavor of freedom and an unrestrained life. Coffee, the lifeblood, awakening the Western spirit. If there was anything more intimately tied to the cowboy's life than food, it was coffee. Coffee was called the lifeblood of the cowboy, not just because it provided energy for long working days, but also because it was a source of comfort, a ritual to start and end a day, an indispensable spiritual anchor. Always served black, very strong, and piping hot, often without sugar or milk, this cup of coffee was truly the kick needed to overcome the chill of the night and the fatigue of the day, helping them stay alert and focused. The most famous brand of that era was Arbuckle's, and interestingly, each coffee package often came with a small peppermint candy, a precious and rare treat for cowboys to refresh their palates and bring a bit of simple joy. The cowboys' method of preparing coffee was very simple and practical. A handful of ground coffee was thrown directly into a boiling pot of water over the fire, ready when the ground settled to the bottom. You can imagine cowboys sitting around the campfire, inhaling the rich aroma of coffee wafting in the cool air of dawn or dusk, feeling each hot sip awaken their senses, preparing for a new day or ending a long one. There was even a famous joke to describe the strength of the coffee. If you threw a horseshoe into the pot and it sank, the coffee was strong enough. This shows the importance and intensity of the cowboys' coffee. Not just a drink, but an indispensable part of the identity and spirit of the Wild West, a source of vitality that sustained their endurance. Sourdough starter, the secret to warm, fresh bread and a spirit of self-reliance. In a context where bread-making technology hadn't developed as it has today, sourdough starter was a precious secret, showcasing the ingenuity and talent of every good cookie. Commercial dry yeast wasn't widespread until the early 1940s, so sourdough starter was essential for leavening bread, creating warm, fresh loaves in the middle of nowhere. You can imagine, this wasn't just a baking ingredient, but a living creature that Cookie had to meticulously care for, almost like a member of the crew. Sourdough starter is a mixture of flour and water that absorbs natural yeasts and bacteria from the environment. Caring for sourdough starter was like raising a pet, requiring patience, experience, and skill. Temperature, humidity, and feeding frequency all affected the quality of the starter, and a good cookie would know how to keep his sourdough active and healthy. A healthy batch of sourdough was the key to warm, fragrant bread with the characteristic subtle sour taste that only sourdough could provide. The warmth and aroma of freshly baked bread after a long day on horseback were surely an invaluable comfort, a rare taste of convenience amidst the wild. Sourdough starter wasn't just a baking tool, it was a symbol of self-sufficiency, adaptability, and the art of survival under scarce conditions, where every simple meal became a cherished achievement and demonstrated the cowboy spirit of self-reliance. Did you ever think that a simple dish like beans could become a symbol of a cowboy's endurance and ingenuity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Beyond the basics, luxuries, and unexpected sources. Although the menu primarily consisted of basic items, sometimes cowboys also had the chance to enjoy luxuries, or unexpected dishes from their surroundings, bringing a touch of fresh flavor and joy to their nomadic lives. These dishes demonstrated their resourcefulness and no-waste philosophy. Fresh beef, a rare desire and maximum utilization. Among all the foods on the trail, fresh beef was something cowboys rarely got to enjoy. You might think they're herding cattle, but they don't get to eat beef. That's right. The cattle being herded were the ranch owner's valuable property, and they didn't want cowboys eating their profits. Fresh beef was only butchered when a cow was injured and couldn't continue the journey, an unwanted event that nonetheless brought a rare feast. When that happened, it was a special day, an opportunity for them to enjoy fresh flavor after many days of only eating dry goods and salt pork. However, there was a major challenge. A cow is very large, and a group of cowboys couldn't eat it all in one day, especially without refrigeration, as fresh meat wouldn't last long. So, to avoid waste, fresh meat was often cut into strips and dried into jerky to preserve it for weeks, providing sustained protein for the days to come. Another dish made from jerky was jowler, made from boiled jerky, thickened with flour and seasoned with salt and pepper. This was a creative way to turn jerky into a warm and more palatable meal, especially on cold nights on the prairie. Though rare, whenever fresh beef was available, it was a true feast, a simple but profoundly meaningful joy that brightened the harsh life on the open range. It showed their appreciation for every piece of meat, every resource nature provided, and the cowboys' no-waste spirit. Organs and cowboy oysters, resourceful utilization, and unique culinary discovery. You might be surprised by the cowboys' ingenuity in utilizing everything, especially the animal's organs. In a world where nothing was allowed to go to waste, parts like brains, liver, kidneys, lungs, and other small pieces could be gathered on the first day after butchering a cow and made into son of a stew. This dish was also called son of a bitch stew or rascal stew, using almost every part of a calf except the hide, hooves, and horns. This is strong evidence of the cowboys' no-waste principle, a philosophy vital for survival in a harsh and scarce environment. You can imagine the steaming pot of stew, full of flavors, providing energy and nutrients after a long day's work. Even more uniquely, bull testicles, also known as oysters or Rocky Mountain oysters, were also a fresh dish obtained on the trail when bulls were castrated to become steers. Oliver Nelson, a cowboy cook, learned how to prepare this dish on the spot, and the flavor was described as fatty and rich. This was certainly a unique culinary experience that few people today can imagine, but for cowboys, it was a valuable and indispensable source of protein, a way to make the most of available resources. These dishes not only demonstrate resourcefulness, but also show acceptance and enjoyment of what wildlife offers, no matter how strange. They are a story of creative survival and continuously utilizing everything they could find. Wild game, diverse supplement and survival skills. Although their main job was herding cattle, sometimes cowboys would also hunt wild animals to supplement their diet with fresh meat. This was not only a way to diversify the menu, but also an essential survival skill in the wilderness, where every food source was cherished. Common animals hunted included deer, antelope, or varmints, nuisance animals, like opossums, armadillos, rabbits, rattlesnakes, or even soft-shell turtles. You can imagine a peaceful evening on the prairie after a long day, a rabbit or a rattlesnake roasting over the campfire, bringing a different flavor and a touch of luxury compared to familiar salt beef or beans. Hunting not only provided meat, but was also an opportunity to hone survival skills, locating and adapting to the environment. Every animal hunted was a prize, providing valuable protein and fat, and also a source of pride in their self-reliance. Wild game, though not an everyday meal, was an interesting highlight, showing the diversity and adaptability of cowboys to the natural resources available to them. It was part of the free, challenging, yet adventurous life of the men dedicated to the West, a life of constant seeking and utilization. Fresh vegetables and fruits, a craving for vitamins, and a journey of natural discovery. In a diet primarily consisting of meat, beans, and bread, fresh vegetables and fruits were incredibly valuable, but very rare for cowboys. You can imagine the craving for a crisp, fresh green vegetable after many days of only eating salt pork and beans, something we often take for granted today. To get vegetables further down the trail, cowboys often had to forage for wild plants, such as wild onions or prickly pear, a type of cactus whose fruit can be eaten, providing sweetness and moisture. Wild berries like wild grapes, chokecherries, blackberries, elderberries, wild strawberries, and blueberries were also gathered when available, often used to make puddings, cobblers, and pies, rare desserts that offered a hint of sweetness and freshness. However, a sad reality was that the cowboys' diet often lacked vitamins A and C, which could lead to long-term health problems like scurvy due to vitamin C deficiency. This scarcity made every found vegetable or wild fruit incredibly precious, a small joy amidst a harsh life. Canned goods, the luxury of the era and the taste of progress. By the late 19th century, a technological innovation brought a bit of luxury to the cowboys' menu: canned goods. From around 1883, canned foods became more popular, providing types of food that previously couldn't be preserved on long journeys, opening up a new world of convenience and culinary diversity. You can imagine the feeling of delight, almost overwhelm, when opening a can of pre-packaged food after weeks of only eating dry goods and salt pork, a simple but profoundly meaningful joy. Canned fruits like tomatoes, which were considered a fruit and used in pies at the time, canned peaches, especially Ambassador brand golden peaches in syrup used for cobblers, were beloved sweets. They not only helped add sweet and novel flavors, but also provided some nutrients, helping to combat the monotony of daily meals. Canned goods offered a convenience and variety that cowboys rarely had, helping them feel a bit pampered amidst their harsh nomadic life. It was a sign of progress, bringing a touch of comfort and unexpected joy from the civilized world. It was a way for them to feel connected to better things, and every can of food was a story about the taste of innovation. Spices and other items, elevating flavor and sophistication in the wild. Even in the most challenging conditions, cowboys still tried to add flavor to their meals to make them more appealing, transforming eating from mere survival into simple pleasure. Ranch supply orders from 1885 show an interest in flavor, including cinnamon, nutmeg, cayenne pepper, Coleman's mustard, vanilla, and lemon extract. You can imagine Cookie carefully seasoning these spices into a bean stew or a rare dessert, making simple dishes richer and awakening the taste buds after long days. The presence of these spices shows that, no matter how harsh life became, people always found ways to enjoy and enhance their experience. Additionally, hard cheese was also an important source of nutrition. Dried and paraffin-dipped for months of preservation, this type of cheese provided protein and fat, and was often added to chili beans or cooked in biscuits to add richness and flavor, making the meal heartier and more appealing. This sophistication in using spices and adding cheese is a testament to the cowboys' continuous search for joy and good taste, a special touch amidst wildlife, where every meal was a cherished achievement. Sarsaparilla, the miracle, refreshment and the taste of invigoration. Among beverages other than coffee, sarsaparilla emerged as a unique and favored drink for cowboys. Although it wasn't a panacea, as the quacks of the time claimed, it was still loved by cowboys for the health and energy-boosting benefits it provided, helping them recover after tiring hours of work. Brewed from the Smilax medica herb, sarsaparilla had a distinctive flavor, somewhat similar to modern root beer, but with a slight herbal taste and natural aroma. You can imagine cowboys resting after a long day working under the hot sun, enjoying a cool glass of sarsaparilla, feeling the refreshment and a little energy boost, helping their spirits lift. It was not just a refreshing drink, but also a part of Western culture, a kind of spiritual elixir that helped them overcome fatigue and maintain optimism. Sarsaparilla is another example of how cowboys utilized every available resource, from nature to new products, to make their lives a little more bearable. It evokes an era where simple drinks also carried their own stories, a characteristic touch of the Wild West, a symbol of refreshment and unexpected joy. Of all the unique cowboy foods we've just explored, which one surprised you the most? Leave a comment below. South versus North. The difference in grub. You might be surprised to learn that not all cowboys had the same diet. There was a significant difference between Southern and Northern cowboys, reflecting the living conditions and abundance of resources in each region. Texas cowboys were said to have the worst diet. Their daily rations often consisted only of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, unless a steer was butchered. A 1874 record stated that cornbread, salt bacon, and coffee accounted for 9/10 of their diet. They often cooked for themselves with crude and limited utensils, having no plates, knives, or forks, except their pocket knives, indicating maximum scarcity and simplicity. Coffee was very strong and without sugar or milk, merely a raw energy source. Life in Texas was harsh, and the meals reflected that. A simple and deprived existence, yet no less resilient. Montana cowboys, 1870s to 1880s. In complete contrast, they were described as living high on the hog. A Texas cowboy even called it picnicking. They had everything money could buy, and a clean and polite cook with a paper hat, indicating much better professionalism and working conditions. They had fresh beef regularly, an unimaginable luxury for Southern cowboys. Their food included canned tomatoes and peaches, hot cakes for breakfast, bread for lunch, and hot biscuits for dinner, a diverse and abundant menu. Teddy Blue Abbott, a cowboy who worked all over the West, was greatly surprised by the excellent food in Montana, saying that many Southern cowboys stayed in the North, despite the cold, simply because the food was so much better. This shows the importance of food for their morale and choices. A good meal could change their entire life on the trail and retain skilled workers. If given the choice, would you want to experience the meal of a Texas cowboy or a Montana cowboy? Share your reasons. Although Western films often don't show it, cowboys were a very diverse group, especially in the late 19th century, including many Black, Mexican, and Native American individuals. Mexican vaqueros, hired by Spanish ranchers to herd cattle, are considered the first cowboys, bringing their cultural and culinary heritage with them. Therefore, it's no surprise that cowboys in the southwestern United States enjoyed Tex-Mex flavors on the trail. Dishes like frijoles, beans, fajitas, carne asada, and chili all have Mexican culinary origins and were staples for cowboys. This demonstrates the strong cultural fusion that shaped the Wild West's cuisine, creating a much richer culinary identity than we often imagine, a harmonious blend of cultures. 20. Bizarre things from the Old West that you have never seen before. Ever heard of a governor wearing boots made of outlaw skin? Or a gunslinger silenced by snoring? The Wild West wasn't just cowboys and shootouts. It was a land of bizarre twists and chilling tales. Forget what you think you know about the Old West. We're diving into 20 spine-tingling true stories, stranger than any Hollywood Western. John Wesley Hardin. They say Hardin boasted about killing 41 men, a number that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the man definitely had a trigger finger itch. He spent over 15 years behind bars, but even prison couldn't tame this wild man. In 1895, he was gunned down in an El Paso saloon, a fitting end for a life lived on the edge. But the story gets even stranger. Way back in 1877, in Abilene, Kansas, Hardin found himself sharing a hotel with a farmer named Charles Cougar. After a long night of gambling and drinking, a typical Hardin evening, he and Cougar checked into neighboring rooms. Now, picture this. It's the dead of night, and Hardin's jolted awake by a sound so loud it's shaking the walls. Cougar's snoring. Annoyed, Hardin yells for quiet. Nothing. So what does a notorious outlaw do? He grabs his gun and fires several shots through the wall. Poor Cougar didn't even wake up. He was dead before he knew what hit him. Black cowboys. Hollywood often portrays cowboys as all white, but the reality was far more diverse. In fact, it's estimated that as many as 1 in 4 cowboys were black. These black cowboys played vital roles on ranches, doing everything from herding cattle and branding animals to breaking horses and competing in rodeos. They were essential to the ranching industry's success. During the Civil War, many white landowners went off to fight, leaving their ranches in the hands of enslaved people. These enslaved people often managed the entire operation, caring for the herds and running the ranch, gaining invaluable experience and skills in the process. With the end of the war and the abolition of slavery, many of these newly freed men found work as cowboys. It was a chance for independence and a way to make a living. Their contributions were immense, shaping the history of the American West. Yet, their stories are often overlooked in popular culture, a clear distortion of history. Saloons. Saloons were the heart of many frontier towns, places of socializing, gambling, and drinking. But let's be clear, these weren't always the glamorous places portrayed in Hollywood movies. While some later saloons were fancy, with pianos and all the trimmings, many of the early saloons were pretty rough. We're talking flimsy tents or crude wooden structures. And while the movies often showcase the fun side, saloons were also places where violence was common. Gunslingers and other rough characters frequented these establishments, and conflicts often erupted into gunfights. It was a risky place to spend your time. One of the most famous saloons, the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, Kansas, is still around today. You can visit it as a tourist attraction, but the original Long Branch was destroyed by fire back in 1885. The one you see today is a reconstruction, preserving a piece of that wild history. Charles Earl Bowles, Black Bart. Black Bart wasn't born in the dusty plains of the Wild West. He hailed from England, arriving in New York with his family back in 1831. He eventually caught gold rush fever and headed west to California in 1849. But instead of striking it, rich panning for gold, he found a different kind of fortune, robbing stagecoaches. Now, Black Bart wasn't just any stagecoach robber. He targeted Wells Fargo, one of the biggest financial institutions of the time. Pretty bold, huh? But what really set him apart was his style. This wasn't some grizzled brute. He was surprisingly courteous, almost gentlemanly in his approach. And his calling card? Poetry. After cleaning out a Wells Fargo stagecoach safe, Black Bart would leave behind a little verse, a literary calling card that made him stand out from other criminals. This wasn't just about the money. It was about making a statement. He was a thief with a flair for the dramatic, a robber with a rhyming problem, so to speak. Over his career, this poetic bandit pulled off 28 robberies, a pretty impressive score. Eventually, he got caught, did some time, and then retired. He faded into obscurity, eventually returning to New York, where he died peacefully in 1917. James Miller, Deacon Jim. Deacon Jim was one of the most feared outlaws in the Wild West. Officially, he was charged with killing 14 men, but some whisper the number could be as high as 50. One of his most controversial alleged acts was the murder of Pat Garrett, the legendary lawman who famously shot and killed Billy the Kid. But here's where things get interesting. Despite his bloodthirsty reputation, Deacon Jim was a devout Methodist. He didn't drink or smoke, and he actively participated in church services, even helping the priests. He also had a reputation for being practically invincible. He reportedly survived 4 gunshot wounds to the chest. Turns out, he wore a steel plate under his shirt as makeshift body armor. However, even the toughest outlaws eventually meet their match. Deacon Jim's luck ran out in 1909 when he was hanged for his crimes. His death marked the end of one of the Wild West's most perplexing figures, a killer who also served God, a survivor who ultimately couldn't escape his past. Pony Express. Imagine covering over 3,000 miles on horseback. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what the Pony Express did, and it did it incredibly fast. This fast mail service was a marvel of its time. They managed to deliver mail from Missouri to Sacramento, California, in just 10 days. Running from 1860 to 1861, the Pony Express was all about speed. To make it work, they had a relay system. Riders would switch horses every 10 to 15 miles, ensuring fresh mounts and maintaining speed across its vast route. The Pony Express was a huge success initially, representing a groundbreaking advancement in communication. But its time in the spotlight was short. After just 18 months, it was over. Even though it was efficient and got the mail across the country quickly, the promoters lost a fortune, around $200,000. Why the failure? The telegraph. It proved to be faster, cheaper, and more efficient. The Pony Express, while a remarkable achievement and a brief, exciting chapter in American history, became obsolete almost as quickly as it became famous. Pearl Hart. Pearl Hart, a Canadian woman who traded the familiar for the adventure of the Wild West and ended up making history along the way. Pearl was captivated by the Wild West, her dreams fired up after seeing a Buffalo Bill Wild West show at the age of 17. She packed her bags and headed to Arizona, where her life took a dramatic turn. She teamed up with a man named Joe Boot, and together they pulled off a daring stagecoach robbery in 1899. It was a bold move, but it didn't quite go as planned. They got lost in the unforgiving Arizona desert and were eventually captured. Now, Pearl wasn't just any ordinary criminal. She became a real celebrity, albeit a criminal one, gaining notoriety as only the second woman to attempt a stagecoach robbery and the first to survive to tell the tale. Her arrest was big news. Pearl spent time in jail, but it wasn't a long sentence. Because Arizona prisons didn't have facilities specifically for women at the time, she received a pardon and was released after just 18 months. Charles Kennedy. We're talking about Charles Kennedy and his rest stop, a place that was anything but restful. It all started around 1870. A weary traveler stopped at Kennedy's roadside rest stop somewhere between Elizabethtown and Taos, New Mexico. The stop was run by Kennedy, a big bearded man, and his wife, Rose, a woman of Ute descent. They had a 5-year-old son, and it was this young boy who unknowingly set the stage for a horrific tragedy. Innocently, the boy revealed a dark secret to the traveler. His father was a murderer, and he was planning to kill him too. Sadly, the child's chilling prophecy came true. Kennedy shot the traveler dead, a cold-blooded act of violence. But he didn't stop there. To ensure his crime remained hidden, he also murdered his own son, silencing the only witness to his evil deed. This wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout his life, Kennedy operated his roadside stop as a trap. He'd lure unsuspecting travelers to his cabin, rob and murder them, and steal their belongings. He left a trail of bodies in his wake, a grim testament to his cruel nature. Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy was a bank and train robber, a not-so-successful one, it seems. He met his end in a shootout with police in Oklahoma in 1911. Nobody claimed his body. Enter Joseph L. Johnson, the local undertaker, who saw a business opportunity. Instead of a simple burial, he embalmed Elmer, dressed him up like a Wild West outlaw, complete with a rifle, and charged a penny for people to come and gawk. Talk about a morbid sideshow. Years later, two men showed up claiming to be Elmer's long-lost brothers, wanting to give their kin a proper burial. Johnson, probably feeling a little guilty, handed over the body. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, not in the Wild West. Elmer's remains somehow ended up in a traveling carnival, a bizarre, macabre sideshow attraction. Can you imagine? For years, Elmer's mummified body was carted around the country, his final resting place as uncertain as the life he'd lived. Eventually, what remained of him ended up in a Los Angeles warehouse, forgotten and tucked away amongst dusty boxes. It wasn't until 1964 that Elmer's journey finally came to an end. Someone rediscovered his remains. After all those years on display, Elmer finally got a proper burial. George Parrott. Parrott wasn't just any run-of-the-mill bandit. He was a real bad hombre, and his end came swiftly at the hands of an angry mob back in 1881, hanged no less. But the story doesn't end there. His body didn't just get buried and forgotten. Enter John Eugene Osborne, a doctor and a politician, quite the multitasker. He got his hands on Parrott's remains, and what did he do? He made himself a pair of boots out of Parrott's skin. Yep, you heard that right. And guess when he debuted this unusual footwear? On his inauguration day as Wyoming's governor. But it gets even weirder. They also fashioned a briefcase from Parrott's skin. Can you imagine carrying that to a business meeting? And poor Parrott's skull? It had a life of its own, becoming a rather eclectic collection of household items. Lillian Heath, Wyoming's very first female doctor, a pioneer in her own right, used it as an ashtray, a doorstop, and even a pencil holder. Osborne and his pal, Thomas Meggie, actually used Parrott's brain to try and figure out if there was some kind of link between his brain and his criminal behavior. Early forensic science was unique, to say the least. In the Old West, card players took precautions to ensure their safety. Card games in the Old West were serious business, and safety was paramount. Experienced players always tried to sit with their backs to the wall, giving them a clear view of the entrance. That way, they could see anyone approaching and avoid any unwanted surprises, like, say, a surprise attack. Unfortunately, even the best precautions sometimes fail. In 1876, James Butler Hickok, better known as Wild Bill Hickok, a legendary gunslinger and a man who knew his way around danger, found this out the hard way. He was playing cards at the Nuttall and Mann Saloon No. 10 in Deadwood, South Dakota. Following the safety rules, he sat with his back to the main entrance, seemingly secure. But his killer, Jack McCall, a man driven by revenge, sneaked in through a back door. Wild Bill never saw him coming. McCall shot Hickok in the back of the head, killing one of the most famous figures in Wild West history. It just goes to show you, even in a world where everyone's on the lookout for trouble, sometimes the worst kind of trouble sneaks up on you from behind. Please comment 1. to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Frank James. We all know Jesse James, the name synonymous with Wild West outlaws. But today, we're talking about his brother, Frank James, a man many believe was even more ruthless than Jesse. Together, they formed the infamous James Younger Gang, a bunch of bad hombres responsible for a string of violent bank and train robberies. After Jesse's death in 1882, Frank made a surprising decision. He surrendered. He walked into the Missouri governor's office and, with a sigh, uttered a phrase that perfectly summed up his life of violence and unrest. "I have literally lived in the saddle. I have never known a day of perfect peace." Frank stood trial for his crimes, but he was acquitted. He spent the last 30 years of his life working honest jobs, a far cry from the life he'd previously led. He died peacefully in 1915. Fort Griffin. Nestled where Clear Creek meets the mighty Brazos River, Fort Griffin wasn't your typical sleepy frontier town. Oh no, this place was a melting pot, a real Wild West stew, if you will. Cowboys rubbed shoulders with gunslingers, buffalo hunters shared drinks with outlaws, and gamblers tossed dice alongside. Well, let's just say ladies of the night. It was a place where everyone, from honest folk to the most wanted desperados, could find a place, or at least a temporary haven. It earned itself a colorful nickname, Babylon on the Brazos. That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? A wild, untamed place, brimming with a heady mix of excitement, danger, and a whole lot of characters. Some of the biggest names of the Old West passed through Fort Griffin's dusty streets. We're talking about notorious gunslinger John Wesley Hardin, the man who boasted of killing 41 people. Then there's the legendary Doc Holliday, that quick-draw dentist-turned-gunfighter, along with his lady love, Big Nose Kate. These folks weren't just passing through, they were part of the town's vibrant, and sometimes violent, fabric. Bloody Benders. The Benders, John, his wife Elvira, their daughter Kate, and their son, John Jr., ran an inn in Kansas during the 1870s. Seems innocent enough, right? Wrong. Unexplained disappearances started cropping up in the area, and suspicion, naturally, fell on the Benders. Rumors swirled. Some whispered that the family practiced witchcraft, adding a layer of supernatural dread to an already unsettling situation. But there was no real proof linking them to the disappearances, until neighbors decided to investigate the inn. What they found was horrifying. The basement of the Bender Inn was a macabre burial ground, a secret grave filled with the bodies of several missing individuals. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The Benders, realizing their game was up, vanished without a trace. They disappeared into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of terror and unanswered questions. To this day, nobody knows for sure what happened to the Bloody Benders. Women of the Wild West. The Old West was a man's world. In many frontier towns, the ratio was 3 men for every woman. In some places, like California, it was even worse, as much as 9 men to 1 woman. This imbalance created unique opportunities and challenges for women. Saloons, the hubs of social life, often employed women to sing, dance, and simply keep the men company. Their presence livened up the atmosphere, encouraging men to spend their money on drinks and making the saloon more profitable. Now, it's easy to assume that all these women were prostitutes, but that wasn't necessarily the case. While prostitution was certainly a part of life in many saloons, many women held other roles, earning respect and dignity for their work. Their stories are often left untold, yet they were just as much a part of the Wild West as the cowboys and gunslingers we hear so much about. Bounty hunters in the Wild West. To get paid, bounty hunters had to bring their quarry, dead or alive, to the authorities. Now, if your quarry was dead, That meant transporting a body, often over long distances. Not exactly a picnic, just like Clint Eastwood showed us in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But things changed with the arrival of photography. Instead of hauling bodies around, bounty hunters started taking their deceased catches to photographers to get a picture taken as proof. The photographer would carefully prop the body against a wall, ensuring that the picture clearly showed the deceased. This was a much easier way to claim their reward. Geronimo. Born in what is now Arizona, Geronimo dedicated his life to protecting his people's way of life. He led his tribe in countless battles against both the U.S. and Mexican armies, constantly fighting to prevent them from being forced onto reservations. His resistance was legendary. Despite his bravery and his strategic brilliance as a warrior, Geronimo was eventually captured. His story doesn't end there, though. In his later years, he converted to Christianity and even made a living selling handcrafted bows and arrows, along with autographed photos. Geronimo's life is a powerful symbol of the resistance and the forced adaptation that many Native American leaders faced during the expansion of the United States and Mexico. Firewater. Firewater wasn't just a catchy name. It described the experience perfectly. This wasn't your average whiskey. This stuff was potent, dangerous, and legendary. Back in the Old West, selling whiskey to Native Americans required a little showmanship. Traders would literally throw the whiskey into a fire. The fact that it wouldn't extinguish proved its high alcohol content. It was a dramatic demonstration of just how strong this stuff was. And strong it was. The recipe was far from refined. We're talking about a concoction of burnt sugar, chewing tobacco, yes, you read that right, and raw, unrefined alcohol. Imagine the flavor. Probably not something you'd want to sip while enjoying a sunset. This whiskey packed a serious punch, capable of flooring even the toughest cowboys and gunslingers. One shot was all it took to understand why they called it firewater. It wasn't just a drink, it was an experience, and not always a pleasant one. It was the Wild West's version of a dangerous game, a game that many played, often with regrettable consequences. Which of these unusual tales shocked you the most, and why? Alice Ivers. Alice arrived in the United States from England in 1865 with her family. After finishing school, she found herself in Colorado, and it was there, amidst the boisterous atmosphere of the region's saloons, that she discovered her talent for poker. Her journey began in a Leadville saloon, coincidentally owned by Bob Ford, the same Bob Ford who famously killed Jesse James. Alice wasn't just a skilled card player, she possessed undeniable charisma. She quickly earned the nickname Poker Alice, captivating audiences with her charm and her impressive poker skills. She knew how to use her allure to her advantage, distracting opponents and drawing huge crowds to the saloons where she played. Her reputation soared when she won a staggering $6,000 in a single night, a massive sum back then. But Alice's story takes a dark turn. She was involved in a deadly incident in one of her own saloons, killing a soldier. This led to her arrest and imprisonment, bringing a tragic end to the career of a woman who'd become a legend in the Old West's gambling halls. Scarves. Think of the Old West, dusty trails, scorching sun, and chilly nights. A simple scarf was a cowboy's best friend. During long cattle drives, it shielded their faces and lungs from dust and grit, protecting them from the breathing problems. The same scarf could also protect their necks from sunburn or provide a little extra warmth on a cold night. Need to grab that steaming pot off the fire? The scarf provided a handy, heat-resistant grip. And here's where it gets interesting. That same scarf could also be used as a quick disguise. A simple adjustment could turn it into a makeshift mask, concealing a robber's identity during a bank heist or stagecoach robbery. Camels in the U.S. Army. Now, it might sound strange, but back in 1856, Using camels in the army seemed like a brilliant idea. The military saw how effective camel cavalry was in places like Asia and Africa, and figured, why not give it a try in the deserts of the American West and Southwest? So, they imported 75 camels all the way from the Middle East and set up a base, Camp Verde, in Texas. Initially, the experiment was promising. These camels could handle the long, harsh journeys across the desert, far outperforming horses in those conditions. But things quickly went downhill. Turns out, camels aren't exactly known for their obedience. They were difficult to train, unresponsive to commands, and they had a nasty habit of grumbling and spitting, not exactly ideal traits for a military animal. Then the Civil War broke out, and the whole camel experiment was abandoned. The army unit was disbanded, and the camels were either sold off to circuses or released into the wild. St. Elmo's Fire. St. Elmo's fire isn't some kind of mythical creature. It's a real atmospheric phenomenon. It's a glowing light caused by ionization of air during thunderstorms, often seen as a bluish glow around tall objects. Sailors in ancient times saw it as a sign of good luck. But in the Wild West, St. Elmo's fire took on a different meaning. Imagine this. You're a cowboy out on the plains during a thunderstorm, and suddenly you see this eerie glow on the horns of your cattle or even the ears of your horse. It's a strange, otherworldly sight, and in the dimly lit landscape of the Old West, it would have been truly unnerving. This unexpected light show gave the animals an almost supernatural appearance, capable of scaring even the toughest cowboys and outlaws. It's a reminder that even the most scientifically explainable phenomenon can take on a mysterious, even terrifying aura, especially in the isolated and often superstitious world of the Wild West. Have you ever visited a location mentioned in the video? Share your experience. Scalping. Scalping wasn't invented by white settlers. It originated with various Native American tribes as a way to display power and skill in battle. Unfortunately, this gruesome practice was later adopted by white settlers, becoming a tool of intimidation and a symbol of their dominance over Native Americans. The American Civil War saw some particularly brutal examples of this practice. William Bloody Bill Anderson, a Confederate guerrilla leader, and his men were notorious for their extreme violence. Their actions were marked by cruelty and brutality, and scalping was unfortunately among their horrific acts. Mary Catherine Horney. Mary Catherine Horney, better known as Big Nose Kate. Her life was full of unexpected turns and a whole lot of grit. Born into wealth, she lost her parents early in life and was raised by adoptive parents. Life took another turn when she became a widow. She eventually ended up in Texas, where she worked as a dancer and a prostitute. Not uncommon for women in the Wild West. It was in Texas that she met John Henry "Doc" Holliday, a legendary gambler and gunslinger who would later become infamous for his role in the gunfight at the OK Corral alongside Wyatt Earp. Kate and Doc became lovers, and she became deeply involved in his life and his schemes. One of Kate's most daring acts involved helping Doc escape from jail. She set fire to a barn to create a huge distraction, allowing Doc to slip away and avoid a much longer prison sentence. It just shows you that even in the Wild West, there were women who weren't afraid to take risks and help their men, even if those men were notorious outlaws. Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull was one of the most important Native American leaders of the 19th century. He was a brave warrior, but he also believed in finding peaceful solutions to conflicts with the encroaching settlers. He was deeply connected to the land and animals, earning the respect of his people. For years, Sitting Bull and his tribe faced the relentless advance of the U.S. and Canadian armies. Eventually, he surrendered and was forced onto a reservation. But his story doesn't end there. He actually spent 4 months working for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. He performed traditional Native American horseback riding, traveling across North America and even briefly to Europe. but it wasn't a perfect fit. He ultimately left the show, unable to fully reconcile his way of life with the ways of the white settlers. Even as times change, the spirit of the old Chuckwagon lives on, sometimes in a simple meal, sometimes in a quiet memory. Have these stories sparked memories of your own? Or maybe a favorite cowboy meal from your past? Share them below. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and stick around for more heartfelt stories from Who Remembers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.